next we have Suzanne Petroni, who's going to come up and talk to us about what macro trends impact food security. So please join me in giving her a very warm welcome.
All right. Get the slides up. So that's a boring title, what macro trends impact food security. Oops. So instead, I'm going to talk about something a little more specific to this conference. You're all doing an amazing job talking about how to feed 9 billion people. I'm going to focus on the 9 billion people part. Population, yay. Exciting. But seriously, do you ever wonder what it means to have 9 billion people and how we're going to get there, and whether that's it or we're going to keep growing after 2050? So that's what I want to talk about. And I'm also going to give you something that I believe lies at the very core of solving our population growth issues and also at the core of solving our food security challenges. So to start, we have to go back a couple hundred years to this pasty-faced white guy in London, England. This is Thomas Malthus. I'm sure most of you know Malthus, right? He was probably the first person to suggest, publicly at least, that having fewer children would solve our planet's woes. He thought that because population growth increased exponentially, but our natural resources were finite, that societies would inevitably fail. His basic theory was if a couple has 2 children, and those 2 have 2 more children, 2 leads to 4, leads to 8, 16, and so forth. So this exponential growth. But food only increases incrementally, 1, 2, 3, etc. So as a result of this, he predicted hunger, famine, and this would lead to war and disease, and society would just collapse. Now, throughout history, people haven't necessarily listened to Malthus. People have had large families. Why? Because in poor countries with poor living conditions and high child mortality, you had to have large children to ensure that at least 1 or 2 of them would survive infancy and childhood disease and make their way through adulthood to help you on the farm and ideally help you take care of you in your old age. And this is still the reason for large families in poor countries today. Now we're jumping ahead 150 years to another pasty-faced white guy, sorry, Julie, Norman Borlaug, middle of the 19th century. He's the father of the Green Revolution, the man who saved 1 billion lives. His Green Revolution proved Malthus wrong. It showed that agricultural output could actually increase alongside population growth. And around the same time, in the middle of the 1900s, you saw people seeing advances in science and technology and sanitation and medicine. And all of these things combined to increase life expectancy. So you had still more births happening over time because of this exponential growth issue, and you had lower death rates. And so governments began to worry. They saw more births, now fewer deaths, and this was a solution. This was maybe leading to what Malthus predicted, this population explosion, population bomb. Maybe we were going to have too many people, and we wouldn't have the food or the clean air, water, land. Maybe our national security was at stake. So governments around the world, they started investing because they thought freedom to breed will bring ruin to all. We have to control breeding. So they started investing in contraceptives, condoms, pills, IUDs, and distributing them by the millions around the world, mostly to developing countries, to try to control that breeding. But here's the thing. Contraceptives don't plan families. People do. Women do. Birth control, combined with greater empowerment of women and changing roles about women, led women and men to be able to decide and to have the number of children that they wanted and when they wanted. And so you saw contraception combined with this gender equality lead to fertility rates coming down, family size coming down, and population growth rates coming down. But this couldn't have happened without girls' education, without access to health care, without economic development, and it couldn't have happened without women's empowerment. Giving women the ability to control their fertility, as well as education, information, access to equal roles in society, that's what has led to their ability to determine their family size. And in fact, since the 1950s, fertility rates have come down significantly. Women today are having half as many children as their grandmothers did, from an average of 5 children per woman in the 1950s to 2.5 today. But because of the momentum of past growth, because there were and still are so many people of reproductive age, particularly in the developing world, we're still growing today. World population has doubled in my lifetime, and I'm not that old, from about 3.5 billion people in 1968 to just over 7 billion today. And yes, we're on a path to grow to about 9 billion by the middle of the century. We're adding nearly 80 million people a year to the planet. That's the equivalent of the size of Germany, the country we're in. But most of this growth, almost all of this growth, is taking place in developing countries. Countries like Uganda, Ethiopia, Yemen, Indonesia, countries that are already challenged to meet the needs of their own populations right now. These are countries where women are still having 5 or 6 or 7 children on average because they don't have equal value in society. They don't have access to information, education, and contraception. Valuing women, paying greater attention to women's rights, that's the solution to our population growth issues. And I would argue it's also the solution to our food security challenges. So I bet you're wondering if I was ever going to get around to that topic. So here we go. Let's look at some different pictures, some different pioneers. This is Wangari Maathai. I'm sure you all know her, the founder of the Green Belt movement, environmental advocate, women's rights advocate, Nobel Peace Prize winner. But do you know Sister Maria Waziri from Western Tanzania? Sister Maria, when she was 17 years old in the 1980s, she had a vision. She wanted to grow land. She wanted to grow crops. But women in Western Tanzania don't own land. Girls certainly don't own land. But she had this vision, so she went to her community leaders and she requested this plot of land that no one else wanted. It was a sand-filled, barren furrow that nobody wanted. So when she asked the men, they laughed. Sure, go ahead, Maria, take the land. Well, for the past 30 years, she has grown maize, sugarcane, cassava, bananas, beans. She's raising 8 goats and 26 chickens. She has enough food to produce not only food for herself, but the 12 orphans that she takes care of. And her model has been emulated by over 300 people in her village who've taken land that others didn't want, that didn't look like it could produce any food, and they're now more food secure because they're growing food on it. And what about Deo from Bahia State, Brazil? With the support of ActionAid, Deo and other farmers in her community are sharing their experiences and their knowledge about agroecological farming, and they're shaking up commonly held beliefs that women are just helpers on the farm. They're now respected by the men in their community because they have knowledge that they can share. And Mavluda from Tajikistan, who set up a community gardening cooperative that is providing food for the whole community right now. And then there are countless billions other women whose names we don't know. The billions who spend 2 or 4 or 6 hours a day collecting firewood for their household fuel and cooking. The 3 billion women and girls who spend hours each day sitting over polluting cook stoves, breathing in the same toxic fumes that are polluting our environment into their lungs so their families can eat. The women who spend hours a day collecting water and doing their family's laundry. Women in sub-Saharan Africa spend 40 billion hours collecting water each year That's equivalent to the entire labor put in by the entire French workforce in 1 year. Women and girls around the world, they're the living infrastructure. They replace the physical infrastructure that we all take for granted, or at least many of us do. They're replacing the electrification, the piped water, and the crop harvesting equipment with their human labor, which is very often unpaid and almost always undervalued. Importantly, women are also key to farming around the world. They are the majority of the people who plant, harvest, grow, tend, and often bring to market food. Women represent 60 to 80% of agricultural workers worldwide. And this is very important. If women were given the same access to agricultural inputs, training, seeds, fertilizer, if they're given the same access as men, agricultural yields would increase by up to 30% at the household level, and up to 4% overall. There's a simple but powerful equation that holds true across the developing world. Men reinvest less of their income in household health and welfare. If women are given the decision-making over investments, they will most often reinvest their wealth in household health, childhood nutrition. Women have the knowledge. They're the ones who are on the front lines dealing with the consequences of droughts and floods that are caused by climate change. They're the ones who have the information when they go into the forest about which mushrooms or plants, roots and leaves are edible and safe and can supplement their family's food in times of shortages. They are assets that we need to bring to the table. They need to be included in agenda setting and decision making around all of our food security interests. It's not only the right thing to do in ensuring gender equality, it's the smart thing to do. Investing in women can increase agricultural output. It can improve child nutrition, nutrition security, and food security. And it can lead to better environmental outcomes. So really, it's as simple as this. Involve women. Provide women with health care, with agricultural inputs, with the ability to make decisions, and you're well on your way to ensuring a just, a sustainable, and a food secure world for generations to come. Thank you.